The champagne glass shattered against Italian marble, crimson wine bleeding across white stone like an omen. Amara Okonkwo stood perfectly still in her evening gown, one cheek burning from the blow, watching her husband's hand still raised in the air, the same hand that had slipped a ring on her finger 9 years ago, promising forever. Behind him, draped across their marital bed in nothing but his shirt, sat Vivienne Rousseau, smiling like she'd already won. But what neither of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the woman they'd just humiliated wasn't just any wife. 3 months from now, Vivienne would be in prison. 6 months from now, Dorian Ashcroft would be begging on his knees. And 1 year from now, Amara would be sitting in his office chair, running his empire, while he watched from the outside looking in. The slap was his biggest mistake. But her silence? That was her deadliest weapon. Someone once told me these stories would never matter, that no one would listen. If you're here right now, help me prove them wrong. Subscribe, because stories like this deserve a voice. The night began like every other lie. Amara had returned home early from the charity gala, her feet aching in Louboutin heels, her face tired from smiling at donors who saw her only as Dorian Ashcroft's beautiful accessory. She'd spent 9 years perfecting that smile, the one that made people comfortable, that made them underestimate her, that made them think she was just another trophy wife content with credit cards and ignorance. She pushed open the bedroom door expecting darkness. Instead, she found devastation. Vivienne didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She sat up slowly, deliberately, letting the silk sheet fall just enough to make her point. Her platinum blonde hair caught the lamplight, her green eyes gleaming with something that looked almost like triumph. Amara's mind catalogued every detail with the precision of a woman who'd learned long ago that emotion was a luxury she couldn't afford. Amara. Dorian's voice cut through the silence, sharp with irritation rather than guilt. He stood from the bed, not bothering to cover himself, his 6'3" frame blocking her view, like he could somehow minimize what she'd just witnessed. This isn't what it looks like. The laugh that escaped her lips was bitter, foreign. It looks like my husband is fucking another woman in our bed. Don't be crude. He reached for his robe, his movements casual, as if they were discussing the weather. You're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. That's when she saw it, the flicker of annoyance in his ice-blue eyes, the tightness in his jaw that said he was angry at her for ruining his evening. Not guilty. Not apologetic. Angry. How long? Amara's voice was steady, controlled. 9 years of marriage to a man who dealt in weapons, drugs, and blood money had taught her to never show weakness. Does it matter? Vivienne's French accent dripped with condescension as she finally stood, wrapping herself in Amara's robe, her favorite one, the cream silk she'd brought back from Lagos last year. He chose me, Sherry. He's been choosing me for 18 months. 18 months. A year and a half of lies. Of late meetings and business trips and kisses that tasted like betrayal she was too trusting to recognize. Amara turned to leave, her spine straight, her head high. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Dorian's hand caught her wrist, spinning her around with enough force to make her stumble. Where do you think you're going? Let go of me. We need to talk about this like adults, Amara. You can't just walk away. Adults? The word tasted like ash. You want to talk about adult behavior while your mistress is wearing my robe? His grip tightened, fingers digging into her skin hard enough to bruise. Watch your tone. She'd seen this before, the shift in his eyes when someone challenged him, the coldness that preceded violence. She'd watched him break men's fingers for lesser disrespect, seen him order executions with the same mouth that had whispered he loved her. But she'd always believed she was different. Special. Protected. You're hurting me. I'm hurting you? His laugh was cruel, unfamiliar. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? 9 years of playing house with you, maintaining this facade of respectability while you contributed nothing. The words hit harder than fists. I've been beside you through everything. Every risk, every enemy, every. You've been decoration. Vivian's voice was almost bored. Beautiful, yes, but ultimately useless. Dorian needs a real partner. Someone who understands his world. Someone like me. Amara looked at this woman, this stranger who'd invaded her life, her home, her marriage, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Vivian Rousseau, 28 years old. Art dealer by day, Dorian's confidant by night. She'd been at their dinner parties, their charity events, smiling at Amara while stealing her husband in the spaces between small talk. Someone like you, Amara repeated softly. Someone willing to betray anyone for the right price. The slap came before she saw it coming. Dorian's palm connected with her face with enough force to snap her head sideways, the crack echoing through the bedroom like a gunshot. Pain exploded across her cheekbone, sharp and immediate. She tasted copper, felt warmth trickling from her split lip. For a moment, the world stopped. Amara stood frozen, one hand rising slowly to her burning cheek, her dark eyes fixed on the man she'd loved since she was 23 years old. The man she'd left her family for, her country for, her dreams for. The man who'd promised her the world and just delivered the ultimate betrayal. That's for embarrassing me, Dorian said, his voice cold, empty. For walking in here with your accusations and your drama. I've given you everything, Amara. A home, a name, a life. And this is how you repay me? By making scenes. She should have been crying. Any other woman would have been on her knees, begging, pleading. But Amara Okonkwo had been raised by a mother who survived civil war, who'd crossed deserts with 3 children and nothing but determination. She had her grandmother's blood, a woman who'd stared down colonial soldiers without flinching. Pain she could handle. Humiliation she could survive. But this disrespect, this violence, this casual dismissal of everything she'd sacrificed, ignited something in her that had been dormant too long. You're right, she said quietly, her voice like silk over steel. You did give me everything. And now I'm going to take it back. She turned and walked out of the bedroom, down the spiral staircase, through the foyer with its crystal chandelier and imported marble. She walked past the bodyguards who pretended not to notice her bleeding lip, past the kitchen where staff averted their eyes, past the walls hung with art worth millions. She walked out into the November night wearing a $1,000 dress and carrying nothing but her dignity and a plan that was already forming in her mind like a storm-gathering force. Behind her, she heard Dorian call her name, not apologetic, but annoyed, like she was a child throwing a tantrum. He expected her to come back, to forgive, to forget. He didn't know that the woman he'd just struck wasn't the girl he'd married. 9 years ago, Amara had been naive, trusting, soft. But 9 years of watching him operate, of sitting quietly in corners during his business meetings, of being underestimated and overlooked, had taught her everything she needed to know about his empire. She knew his suppliers, his enemies, his weaknesses, his secrets. She knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. And she knew exactly how to destroy him. The doorman called her a car without being asked, his eyes sympathetic but professional. As she slid into the back seat, she caught her reflection in the window, her lips swelling, mascara smudged, her cheek already darkening with the promise of a bruise. She pulled out her phone and took a photograph. Evidence. Documentation. The first piece of a puzzle she was about to assemble. Then she scrolled through her contacts and stopped on a name she hadn't called in 4 years, Kwame Mensah. Her ex-boyfriend. The man she'd almost married before Dorian swept her off her feet with promises and passion. Kwame, who worked for the FBI's Organized Crime Division. Kwame, who'd once told her that if she ever needed anything at all, he'd be there. She stared at his name for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the call button. This was it. The point of no return. Once she made this call, there would be no going back. No reconciliation. No forgiveness. Just war. Amara smiled, and it was nothing like the smile she'd worn at the gala. This smile was her mother's smile, her grandmother's smile, the smile of women who'd survived worse than cheating husbands and entitled mistresses. She pressed call. On the third ring, Kwame answered. Amara? Is that you? Hello, Kwame, she said, her voice steady despite the blood on her lip and the fire in her chest. I need to talk to you about Dorian Ashcroft. And I need you to listen very carefully, because I'm about to hand you the biggest organized crime case of your career. There was a pause. Then, I'm listening. As the car pulled away from the mansion, her prison disguised as a palace, Amara watched the lights grow smaller in the distance. Somewhere in that house, Dorian was probably already back in bed with Vivian, convinced his wife would return by morning, apologetic and compliant. He had no idea he'd just declared war on the wrong woman. And she had 18 months of fury to unleash. The safe house smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork, a far cry from the penthouse Amara had called home for 9 years. She sat across from Kwame Mensah in a windowless room somewhere in downtown Seattle, fluorescent lights humming overhead, making her look paler than usual despite her rich, dark skin. Kwame had aged well. His face still held that gentle strength she remembered, though new lines creased his forehead and gray-peppered his close-cropped hair. He pushed a cup of terrible coffee across the table toward her, his eyes never leaving the bruise darkening her cheek. He did that to you. It wasn't a question. Amara touched her face absently, the swelling tender under her fingertips. That was just the exclamation point on a very long sentence. Tell me everything. So she did. She told him about the mistress, the 18 months of lies, the humiliation. But more importantly, she told him about the things she'd seen while playing the role of Dorian Ashcroft's obedient wife. The meetings held in their home while she served drinks and smiled. The conversations she'd overheard while they assumed she wasn't listening or was too simple to understand. The files she'd glimpsed in his study when he left doors unlocked, confident she'd never betray him. Kwame listened without interrupting, his pen moving across his notepad in quick, efficient strokes. When she finished, he sat back and studied her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You understand what you're doing, he said carefully. Once you start this, there's no stopping it. Dorian Ashcroft isn't just any criminal. He's connected to some of the most dangerous organizations in the world. The people he works with don't forgive betrayal. He slapped me. Amara's voice was quiet but firm. In front of his mistress. In our bedroom. Like I was nothing. Like 9 years meant nothing. I know. And I'm sorry. But you need to understand. I understand perfectly. She leaned forward, her dark eyes meeting his without flinching. I understand that for 9 years, I made myself small for him. I left my master's program in economics because he said I didn't need a career. I stopped speaking to my family because he said they were too traditional, too judgmental of his business. I became whatever he needed me to be, and the moment I stopped being useful, he replaced me. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photographs she'd taken over the past 2 days, the bruise from different angles, the split lip, the finger-shaped marks on her wrist. Then she showed him something else, screenshots of text messages, photographs of documents she'd carefully captured over the years, names and dates and locations. Kwame's expression shifted as he looked through them, his professional mask slipping to reveal something like shock. "How long have you been collecting this?" "I didn't realize I was collecting it," Amara admitted. "I thought I was just being a good wife. Paying attention. Being present. Dorian liked having me there during meetings. He said I made things feel more civilized, more legitimate. He never thought I was actually listening. But you were. Always." She smiled without humor. Turns out being underestimated is its own kind of power. Kwame stood and walked to the window, staring out at the gray Seattle sky. "This information. Amara, this could bring down half a dozen major players in the Pacific Northwest. Maybe more. We've been trying to build a case against Ashcroft for years, but he's careful. Too careful. Insulated. Not anymore." He turned to face her. "He'll know it was you. The moment we move on this, he'll know exactly who gave us the information." "Good." The word came out harder than she intended. "I want him to know. I want him to lie awake at night knowing that the woman he dismissed destroyed everything he built. He could have you killed, Amara. He could try." There was a steel in her voice that made Kwame pause. This wasn't the same woman he'd known years ago, the bright-eyed graduate student with dreams of changing economic policy in developing nations. That woman had been optimistic, trusting, soft around the edges. This woman was something else entirely. "I'll need you to wear a wire," Kwame said finally. "Go back to him. Get him talking. We need recorded confessions, not just documents and hearsay." Amara's stomach turned at the thought of returning to that house, to that bedroom, to that man. But she nodded. "When?" "Soon. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe and prep you properly. This isn't just about getting evidence, it's about keeping you alive while we build the case." Over the next 3 weeks, Amara became someone new. Or perhaps she became who she was always meant to be before Dorian convinced her to shrink. The FBI set her up in a modest apartment under surveillance, gave her a panic button disguised as a necklace, and taught her how to extract information without raising suspicion. She learned to wear a wire so naturally it became second nature, to ask questions that sounded casual but cut straight to the heart of Dorian's operation. But more than that, she learned about herself. In the quiet hours between training sessions, Amara sat alone in her temporary apartment and faced the truth she'd been avoiding for years. She'd been complicit in her own diminishment. Not in Dorian's crimes, she'd never known the full extent of those until recently, but in the erasure of herself. She'd been 23 when they met, fresh out of her undergraduate degree, working as a research assistant while applying to graduate programs. He'd walked into her life like a force of nature, handsome, powerful, attentive in ways that made her feel seen for the first time since leaving Nigeria. He'd pursued her with the single-minded focus he brought to everything, and she'd been flattered, overwhelmed, in love. When he proposed after 6 months, she'd said yes without hesitation. When he suggested she delay her master's program for a year, just 1 year, she'd agreed. When that year became 2, then 3, then indefinite, she'd convinced herself it didn't matter. That being his wife was enough. That love was sacrifice. But what she'd sacrificed wasn't just a career. It was her voice, her autonomy, her connection to everything that had made her who she was. And Dorian had accepted those sacrifices as his due, never once suggesting she reclaim any of it. Because he liked her small. He liked her dependent. He liked her grateful. Until he didn't. Until Vivienne Rousseau came along with her art expertise and her French pedigree and her willingness to be whatever Dorian needed in ways Amara had stopped being useful for. The realization didn't hurt as much as she expected. Instead, it clarified everything. On the 22nd day of her training, Kwame brought her a file. "Vivienne Rousseau," he said, sliding the manila folder across the table. 28 years old, born in Lyon, moved to the States 6 years ago. Legitimate art dealer on the surface, but we've had our eye on her for a while. Amara opened the file, scanning the contents. You think she's involved in Dorian's business? We know she is. She's been authenticating forged art for him, helping him launder money through high-end sales. But more than that. He pulled out another photograph. She's done this before. 3 times, actually. Targets wealthy men, becomes indispensable, then moves on to the next one when something better comes along. So I'm not special, Amara murmured, staring at the timeline of Vivian's previous relationships. Just the latest. That's not what I... No, it's perfect. She looked up, her eyes bright with something that might have been triumph. Don't you see? Dorian thinks he traded up. But he actually downgraded to someone with a pattern of betrayal. Someone the FBI already has documented evidence against. Kwame's expression shifted as he understood. You want to use her? I want to bury them both. Amara's smile was sharp. And I think I know exactly how to do it. She outlined her plan, audacious, risky, requiring perfect timing and nerves of steel. Kwame listened, occasionally interjecting with practical concerns, but ultimately nodding his approval. You're sure about this? He asked when she finished. Once you go back to him, there's no guarantee he'll believe your story. And if he suspects you're working with us, he won't. Amara stood, smoothing down her skirt with practiced elegance. Because I'm going to give him exactly what he expects, a broken wife begging for another chance. Men like Dorian, they think forgiveness is weakness. They think crying is surrender. They have no idea it can be strategy. And what about you? Kwame's voice was softer now, personal rather than professional. Are you really okay with going back to him? After everything? Amara thought about the slap, the mistress, the 9 years of making herself smaller. She thought about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become and the woman she was going to be when this was over. I'm going to answer your question with a question, she said. Have you ever watched someone you love become someone you don't recognize? Kwame nodded slowly. He'd been divorced 3 years now, she remembered. He understood. That's what Dorian did to me, she continued. He turned me into someone I didn't recognize. Someone small and scared and grateful for crumbs. But here's what he didn't count on. I remember who I was before him. And that woman? She doesn't forgive. She doesn't forget. She gets even. She picked up her purse, checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door, and turned back to Kwame with a smile that would have made her grandmother proud. So yes, I'm ready to go back. Because the woman walking into that house isn't his victim anymore. She's his worst nightmare. And he's too arrogant to see it coming. The next morning, Amara returned to the mansion. She'd timed it perfectly mid-morning, when Dorian would be in his study handling business calls, when Vivian would likely still be in bed, comfortable in her new position as lady of the house. The security guard at the gate looked surprised to see her but opened it without question. They knew her, respected her, even if Dorian didn't anymore. She'd always treated the staff well, learned their names, asked about their families. Small kindnesses Dorian had never bothered with. She walked through the front door with her head high, carrying a single suitcase, not like she was moving back in, but like she needed to collect a few things. Vulnerable but not defeated. The perfect bait. Dorian emerged from his study as if on cue, his tie loosened, a glass of whiskey in his hand despite the hour. He looked at her with an expression somewhere between surprise and annoyance. Amara, I wasn't expecting you. I know. She set down her suitcase, maintaining eye contact. I came to get some of my things. I won't be long. He studied her face, noting the fading bruise, the careful makeup, the designer clothes she'd bought with his money. You look well. I've been staying with my cousin in Tacoma, taking some time to think. And what did you think about? This was the moment. the pivot point where everything changed or fell apart. Amara took a slow breath, let her shoulders drop slightly, allowed vulnerability to creep into her expression. I thought about how much I've loved you, how much I've sacrificed, and how maybe I could have been better. She watched something shift in his eyes, satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. He'd expected anger, defiance. Instead, she was giving him exactly what his ego needed, capitulation. Better how? His voice was careful, probing. I became complacent, she said softly, moving closer to him. I stopped trying to be what you needed. I stopped being a partner and became just furniture. Decoration, like Vivian said. And I'm sorry for that. Dorian set down his glass, his attention fully on her now. This was the script he'd written in his head, the wayward wife seeing the error of her ways, begging for forgiveness. His narcissism demanded it. You understand why I needed someone else, he said, not quite a question. I understand why you felt you had no choice. Each word tasted like poison, but she delivered them with perfect sincerity. I understand that I failed you as a wife. Amara. He reached for her face, his fingers brushing the fading bruise, the bruise he'd put there. She didn't flinch. I never wanted to hurt you. Liar. 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 I know, she whispered. And then she played her final card. She stepped into his arms, let him hold her, felt his body relax against hers as he accepted her surrender. Can I come home? She asked against his chest. Not to replace her. I know things are different now, but maybe there's a way we can make this work. Maybe I can earn my place back. She felt him smile against her hair. Victorious. Superior. Completely, utterly fooled. We can discuss it, he said. But things would need to change. You'd need to accept certain realities. I will. I do. I miss you. I miss us. As he led her upstairs, his arm around her waist like nothing had changed, Amara caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Her face was composed, loving, submissive. But her eyes held promises of destruction that Dorian Ashcroft would never see coming until it was far too late. The wire pressed against her skin beneath her blouse, recording every word. The game had begun. Living with a man you're actively destroying requires a particular kind of split consciousness. By day, Amara played the role of the repentant wife with Academy Award precision. She smiled at Dorian's condescension, laughed at his jokes, and sat quietly during business meetings while the wire beneath her clothes captured every incriminating word. By night, she lay beside him in their bed. Vivian had been temporarily relegated to the guest house, a transition Dorian said, and planned his downfall in exquisite detail. The arrangement was exactly as humiliating as he'd intended. Vivian still had access to the main house, still joined them for dinners, still looked at Amara with barely concealed contempt. Dorian seemed to enjoy having both women competing for his attention, making it clear that Amara's position was provisional, dependent on her good behavior and usefulness. What he didn't realize was that every slight, every humiliation, every moment he made her feel small was being carefully documented. Not just by the FBI wire, but by the network Amara was quietly building. It started with Sophia. Sophia Ruiz had been Dorian's personal assistant for 6 years, efficient, professional, and utterly invisible to him despite handling every aspect of his legitimate business operations. She was 42, a single mother of 2, and underpaid by at least $30,000 annually. Amara had always liked Sophia, had always made a point of asking about her daughters, of remembering their names and birthdays. Small kindnesses that seemed insignificant until Amara needed them to matter. Mrs. Ashcroft. Sophia looked up from her desk as Amara passed, surprise flickering across her face. In the 3 weeks since Amara had returned, They'd barely spoken. Dorian had made it clear that Amara's privileges didn't include interfering with his business. Sophia. Amara glanced around, confirming they were alone. Do you have a moment? Of course. They stepped into the small office off the main corridor, and Amara closed the door. For a long moment, she just looked at the other woman, weighing how much to reveal, how much to risk. I need your help, she said finally. And I need you to understand that what I'm about to ask could put you in danger. Sophia's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. What kind of help? The kind that involves the FBI and evidence and destroying everything Dorian's built. There. Cards on the table. Either Sophia would run straight to Dorian, or... What took you so long? Sophia's smile was small, bitter. I've been waiting 3 years for someone to take him down. Amara felt something loosen in her chest. You knew that he's a criminal? That this whole operation is a front for weapons dealing and money laundering? Mrs. Ashcroft, I handle his books. I know exactly what he is. She leaned against her desk, arms crossed. But I also have 2 daughters in private school and a mother in a nursing home I can barely afford. Walking away means losing everything. Helping me could mean losing everything too. Maybe. Or maybe it means finally being able to sleep at night. Sophia pulled out a flash drive from her desk drawer. I've been keeping copies. Just in case. Banking records, shell companies, encrypted communications. I told myself it was insurance, but really, I think I was waiting for this moment. Amara took the flash drive, her fingers closing around it like a weapon. He could kill us both for this. He could try. Sophia's expression hardened. But I'm Cuban, Mrs. Ashcroft. My grandmother survived Castro. My mother crossed the straits in a raft with 3 children and nothing but faith. I come from women who don't scare easy. Besides, she gestured toward the door, toward the mansion beyond. What kind of life is this anyway? Being scared all the time? Being complicit? No. I'm done. Over the next 2 weeks, more pieces fell into place. Marcus, one of Dorian's bodyguards who'd lost a brother to gang violence and hated what he'd become, started providing security schedules and information about Dorian's meetings with known criminals. Takashi Yamamoto, the head of IT who'd been passed over for promotion 3 times in favor of less qualified but more loyal candidates, delivered access to encrypted servers. Even Marguerite, the French housekeeper who'd worked for the Ashcroft family for 15 years, quietly mentioned that she'd seen things, terrible things, and would testify if needed. Amara was building an army of the overlooked and underestimated, and Dorian was too self-absorbed to notice the coup happening under his own roof. But Vivian noticed. You're up to something. Amara looked up from her book to find Vivian standing in the doorway of the library, arms crossed, her expression calculating. It was late afternoon, and Dorian was out at one of his business meetings, which Amara now knew meant coordinating a shipment of illegal weapons from an Eastern European contact. I'm reading, Amara replied calmly, though her heart rate spiked. Is that suspicious now? Everything about you is suspicious. Vivian moved into the room, her movements predatory. You come back here all apologetic and submissive, but I see how you look at him when you think no one's watching. That's not love. That's not even resignation. That's something else entirely. Amara closed her book, a first edition of Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart that her mother had given her, and met Vivian's gaze steadily. You're paranoid. I'm observant. There's a difference. Vivian perched on the arm of the leather chair across from her. I know women like you, Amara. Women who play weak but are actually calculating every angle. You think you're going to win him back, but you're too late. He's mine now. Is he? Amara tilted her head, allowing a small smile. Because from where I'm sitting, you're in the guest house while I'm in his bed. That must bother you. Something flashed in Vivian's eyes, rage quickly suppressed. Temporary arrangement. He promised. He promises a lot of things. Amara stood, moving to the window. Outside, rain pattered against the glass, turning the gardens gray and misty. Tell me, Vivian, how many men have you loved in the past 5 years? 3? 4? Do you remember their names, or do they all blur together after a while? Vivian's face went pale, then red. You've been investigating me. I've been paying attention. Something you might want to try. Amara turned back to her, and for the first time, let some of her real self show through. You think you know Dorian. You think you understand his world. But you're just another transaction to him. Another useful tool. And the moment you stop being useful, she snapped her fingers. You're gone. Just like me. Just like whoever came before me. You're bitter because you lost. Am I bitter? Or am I free? Amara moved closer, dropping her voice. You won what exactly? A man who hits women? Who cheats without remorse? Who'll discard you the second someone younger or more connected comes along? Congratulations, Vivian. Enjoy your prize. She walked past the younger woman, heading for the door, but Vivian's voice stopped her. I'm going to tell him you're planning something. Amara paused, considered, then looked back over her shoulder. Go ahead. Tell him his wife who came crawling back, who accepts every humiliation, who hasn't fought back once in 3 weeks, is secretly plotting against him. See how that makes you look? Paranoid? Jealous? Insecure about your position? She watched the calculation happen in Vivian's expression, the realization that making accusations without proof would only undermine her own credibility with Dorian. That's what I thought, Amara said softly. We understand each other now. You stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine, and we'll let Dorian decide what he wants. Fair. Vivian's jaw clenched, but she nodded. Amara smiled, all warmth and false sincerity, and left the room. But her hands were shaking as she climbed the stairs to the bedroom, and she had to stop halfway up to catch her breath. That was too close. Too risky. But also necessary. Because now Vivian would be watching her, yes. But she'd also be watching Dorian, questioning his decisions, creating friction. And friction created opportunities. That night, as Amara sat at dinner between Dorian and Vivian, a grotesque parody of domestic harmony, she caught Sophia's eye from across the room where the assistant was dropping off some documents. Sophia's almost imperceptible nod told her what she needed to know. The files had been delivered to Kwame. The evidence was mounting. The walls were closing in. You're quiet tonight, Dorian observed, his hand finding Amara's thigh under the table in a possessive gesture that made her skin crawl. Everything all right? Just tired, she said, placing her hand over his, letting him think it was affection rather than endurance. It's been a long day. Well, you should rest. He squeezed her leg, then returned his attention to Vivian, who was describing some art piece she wanted him to acquire. We have the charity gala tomorrow night. I need you both looking perfect. Both. Like they were a set. Like polygamy was just another business arrangement. Amara excused herself after dinner and went to the bedroom, closing the door and leaning against it. The wire was off. She only wore it during specific windows when she knew Dorian would be discussing business, but her phone was active, recording everything for her own records. She pulled it out now and opened the voice notes app, beginning her nightly debrief. Day 21. Vivian is suspicious, but not certain. Dorian is becoming more comfortable with the arrangement, which means he's getting sloppy. Tomorrow night's gala is the perfect opportunity. He's meeting with Nikolai Volkov, the Russian arms dealer. I've confirmed through Marcus that Volkov will be there under the guise of a legitimate businessman. If I can get them talking, we'll have everything we need to. A knock at the door made her freeze. Amara? Dorian's voice. Let me in. She quickly saved the recording, hid her phone, and opened the door. He stood there still in his dinner clothes, but his tie was loosened, his expression softer than usual. Almost guilty? I wanted to apologize, he said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. About dinner. About this whole situation. I know it's not easy for you. This was new. Unexpected. Dangerous. It's fine, she said carefully. I understand the arrangement. Do you? He moved closer, his hand cupping her face, the same hand that had struck it weeks ago. Because sometimes I think I've asked too much. Expected too much. Amara's mind raced. Was this genuine? A test? Manipulation? With Dorian, it was always hard to tell. He was fluent in 3 languages of lies. I love you, she said, because it was what he needed to hear. That's why I came back. That's why I'm trying to make this work. Even with Vivian? Even with Vivian. He kissed her then, and she kissed him back, and she thought about her grandmother's stories of survival. About doing what you had to do to stay alive, to protect what mattered, to win against impossible odds. Tomorrow night, at the gala, everything would change. Kwame and his team would be there, ready to record the meeting with Volkov. Ready to finally have enough evidence to bring Dorian down. But tonight, she was still playing the long game. Dorian pulled back, searching her face. You really have changed, haven't you? You're different than before. I've grown up, Amara said, and it was the most honest thing she'd told him in weeks. I finally understand what it takes to survive in your world. He smiled, satisfied, and pulled her toward the bed. As they lay there in the darkness afterward, his arm heavy across her waist, Amara stared at the ceiling and counted down the hours until his empire started to crumble. 22 hours. That's all she had to wait. 22 hours, and then Dorian Ashcroft would learn what happened when you underestimated the wrong woman. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments, and if this story is hitting different, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Here's something I need you to think about. Have you ever had to become someone you didn't recognize just to survive? Have you ever had to smile through betrayal and wait for your moment? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because Amara's playing the longest game of her life, and I want to know if you think she's doing the right thing, or if revenge is a road that leads nowhere good. The Pacific Northwest Charity Gala was the kind of event where Seattle's elite came to see and be seen, to write tax-deductible checks and pretend they cared about homelessness while drinking champagne that cost more than a month's rent. Amara had attended dozens of these over the years, always as Dorian's beautiful accessory, always smiling, always silent. Tonight would be different. She stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and made her dark skin luminous. The dress was Vivian's suggestion, a power play, choosing Amara's outfit like she was a doll to be dressed. But Amara had accepted it with grace, because the joke was on Vivian. The dress was perfect for what came next. Stunning, Dorian said from the doorway, and there was genuine appreciation in his voice. He looked sharp in his custom tuxedo, every inch the respectable businessman rather than the criminal he actually was. Absolutely stunning. Thank you. She turned, letting him see the full effect. I wanted to make you proud. You always do. He crossed the room and fastened a diamond necklace around her throat, a gift from earlier in their marriage, before everything went wrong. Or before she realized it had always been wrong. Ready? She met his eyes in the mirror. Ready. What he couldn't see was the wire, expertly concealed by the dress's boning. What he didn't know was that Kwame and 3 other agents would be at the gala, disguised as waitstaff and security. What he couldn't imagine was that his perfect, submissive wife was about to hand him to the FBI on a silver platter. They arrived fashionably late, Vivian meeting them at the entrance in a stunning red dress that screamed for attention. The photographers loved it, the powerful businessman with two beautiful women on his arms. Amara saw the speculation in their eyes, the gossip already forming. She didn't care. By tomorrow, they'd have much bigger stories to write. Inside, the hotel ballroom was transformed into a glittering fantasy of ice sculptures and white flowers. String quartets played while Seattle's wealthiest mingled, drinking and laughing and pretending the world outside these walls didn't exist. Amara spotted Kwame immediately. He was positioned near the bar, dressed as a bartender, his eyes meeting hers for just a second before looking away. Across the room, she recognized Agent Sarah Chin, who she'd worked with during her preparation, now in catering staff uniform. Everything was in place. Nikolai. Dorian's voice boomed with false warmth as a tall, silver-haired man approached. Nikolai Volkov, Russian arms dealer, suspected of supplying weapons to at least 3 terrorist organizations, wanted by Interpol but protected by diplomatic immunity and expensive lawyers. Dorian. They shook hands, all smiles and masculine camaraderie. And these must be your lovely companions. My wife, Amara. And my colleague, Vivian Russo. Amara extended her hand, noting how Volkov's eyes raked over her with predatory assessment. She smiled and said nothing, playing her part perfectly. Charming. Volkov kissed her hand with European affectation. Dorian, you're a lucky man. I know it. Dorian's arm tightened around Amara's waist. Shall we find somewhere quieter to discuss business? This was it. The moment everything hinged on. Actually, Amara said, her voice light and apologetic, I'm feeling a bit faint. The champagne, I think. Would you mind if I stepped out for some air? Dorian looked annoyed, but Vivian jumped in immediately. I'll stay with Mr. Volkov. You take care of her. Perfect. Exactly as Amara had predicted. Vivian wanted to be part of the business discussion, wanted to prove herself indispensable. Her ambition was a weapon Amara had learned to wield. No, Amara protested weakly. Don't let me interrupt. I'll just be a moment. Vivian can handle it, Dorian decided. Come, let's get you some water. He led her toward the balcony, and Amara caught Kwame's eye as they passed. He gave the slightest shake of his head, not yet. They needed the conversation with Volkov, needed Dorian incriminating himself. Outside, the November air was sharp and cold, clearing away the cloying perfume and alcohol smell of the ballroom. Amara leaned against the railing, letting Dorian fuss over her. Better, he asked. Much. Thank you. She turned to face him, and in the moonlight, she let herself really look at him. This man she'd loved. This man who'd destroyed her. Dorian, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret it? Any of it? He was quiet for a moment, considering. Regret what? Vivian? Everything. The choices you've made. The things you've done. She paused. The person you've become. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, that she was asking real questions instead of playing her usual passive role. That's an unexpected question. I know, but I've been thinking a lot lately about choices, about consequences, about whether we can ever really escape who we are. Heavy thoughts for a charity gala. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Where's this coming from? I'm just trying to understand you. To understand us. To understand how we got here. He studied her face in the moonlight, and for just a moment, she saw something that might have been genuine emotion. Regret, perhaps. Or nostalgia for what they'd once been. I never wanted to hurt you, he said finally. You have to believe that. But people like me, we can't afford weakness. And love, Amara, love is the ultimate weakness. Is that what I am? A weakness. You were. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin. But you're stronger now. Harder. More like me. Maybe that's why I'm starting to remember why I married you. The words should have felt like victory. Instead, they felt like tragedy. We should get back, Amara said softly. Before Vivian sells you something you don't need. He laughed a real laugh and led her back inside. But as they entered the ballroom, Amara noticed something wrong. Vivian was standing near the windows, her face pale, her body language tense. Volkov was nowhere to be seen. What happened? Dorian demanded, releasing Amara to stride toward Vivian. He had to leave. Suddenly. Something about unexpected business. Vivian's voice was strained. But before he left, he said something strange. What? He said he'd heard rumors. That someone in your organization might be talking to the authorities. He wanted to warn you. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Dorian went very still, his expression transforming from concern to dangerous in a heartbeat. When he turned to look at Amara, she saw something terrifying in his eyes: calculation, suspicion, rage. Rumors, he repeated softly. What kind of rumors? He didn't specify. Vivian was watching Amara too now, but he seemed very concerned. Said you should be careful who you trust. Amara's mind raced. This wasn't part of the plan. Volkov wasn't supposed to be warned. Someone had tipped him off, which meant someone knew about the FBI operation, which meant they had a leak. Dorian, she started, but he held up a hand. Not here. His voice was cold, controlled. We're leaving. Now. Both of you. The ride home was silent except for the rain hammering against the car windows. Amara sat in the back seat, her mind frantically working through scenarios. Who had talked? How much did Volkov know? Was her cover blown? When they arrived at the mansion, Dorian didn't go to his study or the bedroom. He went to the basement. Amara had never been in the basement. It was off-limits, secured with fingerprint locks and security cameras. But tonight, Dorian disabled the alarms and led both women down the concrete steps into a space that looked nothing like the luxury above. This was his real office. His war room. Monitors lined the walls showing security feeds from around the property. File cabinets held documents that would never see daylight. And in the center of it all, a heavy oak desk covered in phones, computers, and weapons. Sit, Dorian commanded, gesturing to two chairs facing the desk. Amara and Vivian sat. Neither spoke. Dorian paced for a moment, his hand running through his hair, his jaw clenched. Then he stopped and looked at them both. One of you is lying to me, he said quietly. One of you has betrayed me. And I'm going to find out who. Vivian immediately protested. Dorian, you can't possibly think. I think, he interrupted, that you've been in my bed for 18 months with access to everything. And I think Amara came back after I humiliated her, claiming forgiveness, claiming love. Both of you have motive. Both of you have opportunity. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Bring him down. 2 minutes later, Marcus was escorted into the basement by two of Dorian's other guards, men Amara didn't know, men who hadn't been part of her careful network. Marcus's face was bruised, his lips split. He'd been beaten. Tell them, Dorian said coldly. Tell them what you told me. Marcus's eyes found Amara's, and she saw the apology in them before he even spoke. I'm sorry. They caught me copying files. They made me talk. No. No. Talk about what? Dorian's voice was deceptively gentle. About the FBI. About the investigation. Marcus's voice broke. About Mrs. Ashcroft. The world tilted. Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Amara? You've been working with the FBI. Dorian's laugh was terrible, cold and bitter and devoid of any warmth. My wife. My devoted, loving wife. The woman I took back into my home. Into my bed. He moved toward her with the slow deliberation of a predator. Tell me it's not true. Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't betray me. Amara stood slowly, her heart pounding, but her face calm. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She wasn't ready. The evidence wasn't complete. But there was no going back now. I can't tell you that, she said quietly. Because it would be a lie. The slap came faster this time, harder. She tasted blood, felt her ear ringing, but she stayed on her feet. You stupid, stupid woman. Dorian's face was inches from hers. Do you have any idea what you've done? What this means? It means you're finished. Amara's voice was steady despite the pain radiating through her skull. It means every crime you've committed, every person you've hurt, every illegal deal you've made is documented and in the hands of the FBI. It means you lose, Dorian. You lose everything. I lose. His hand closed around her throat, squeezing just hard enough to make breathing difficult. I lose? You live in my house. You wear my clothes. You exist because I allow it. And you think you can destroy me? I know I can. She clawed at his hand, but he was too strong. Because I'm not alone. Because everyone you've underestimated, everyone you've dismissed, everyone you've treated as disposable has been working against you. And they're not going to stop. He threw her against the wall, and she hit it hard enough to see stars. Vivian screamed. Marcus tried to intervene but was held back by the guards. Lock them all up, Dorian commanded. The basement safe room. No phones, no communication. I need to think. As the guards dragged them toward a reinforced door Amara hadn't noticed before, she caught one last glimpse of Dorian's face. And what she saw there terrified her more than the violence, more than the imprisonment. She saw a man with nothing left to lose. And those were the most dangerous men of all. The safe room was exactly what it sounded like, a reinforced concrete box with no windows, one heavy door, and absolutely no way out. Amara sat on the floor, her back against the wall, assessing her injuries. Bruised throat, possible concussion, definitely some cracked ribs from hitting the wall. Marcus was in worse shape, his face swollen from the earlier beating. Vivian stood in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself, mascara running down her face. This is your fault, Vivian hissed at Amara. All of this. If you'd just stayed gone. If I'd stayed gone, you'd be exactly where I am right now. Amara's voice was raspy from the choking. Maybe not today. Maybe not this month. But eventually. Because this is what Dorian does. He uses people until they're no longer useful, then he discards them. Or kills them. He wouldn't kill me. He loves me. He loved me too. Or so he said. Amara laughed bitterly. How's that working out for us? Marcus groaned, shifting his position on the floor. The FBI knows where you are, right? They'll come for us. Maybe. Amara wasn't sure. The wire had been disabled when Dorian's guards searched her. Her phone was gone. Kwame would know something went wrong when she didn't check in, but finding her? In a secret basement room in a mansion with top-tier security? That could take time they didn't have. We're going to die here, Vivian whispered. He's going to kill us all. Not if we get out first. Amara pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the pain screaming through her body. She examined the door, solid steel, electronic lock. The walls, reinforced concrete. The ceiling. Wait. She looked up at the ventilation grate. It was small, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet, but it was there. And it was the only thing in this room that wasn't designed to be impenetrable. Marcus. She turned to the bodyguard. If we can get that grate off, can you fit through the ductwork? He squinted up at it, calculating. Maybe. It'll be tight, but maybe. And you know the layout of this house. You know where the ducts lead. Yeah. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You want me to get help. I want you to get us out of here before Dorian decides we're more trouble than we're worth. She looked at Vivian. Those heels. Give them to me. What? Why? Because the heels are metal and I need something to pry open that grate. Unless you have a better idea. Vivian hesitated, then kicked off her expensive shoes. Amara caught one and examined it. Yes, the heel was solid metal, weighted. Perfect. She dragged one of the chairs beneath the vent and climbed up, ignoring how her ribs screamed in protest. The grate was secured with screws, but they'd been there for years, maybe decades. The metal of the heel wasn't ideal, but it would have to work. It took 20 minutes of careful work before the first screw came loose. Her hands were bleeding by the time she got the second one out. The third broke, but the grate was loose enough now that she could pry it free. Okay, she said, climbing down. Marcus, you're up. He looked at the opening, then at her, doubt clear in his expression. Even if I get through, even if I find help, he's got guards everywhere. Security systems. Guns. I know. But he also has enemies. Amara pulled him closer, lowering her voice so Vivian couldn't hear. In my bedroom, in the false bottom of my jewelry box, there's a phone. A burner phone. Kwame's number is the only one programmed in it. Get to it. Call him. Tell him we're in the basement safe room and Dorian's planning to run. How do you know he's planning to run? Because that's what guilty men do when they're cornered. He'll liquidate what he can, eliminate loose ends, that means us, and disappear. She gripped his arm. You have maybe 2 hours. 3 at most. Can you do this? Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do this. Getting him through the vent was a struggle. He was broader than the opening wanted to accommodate, and every movement clearly caused him pain. But desperation was a powerful motivator. After several agonizing minutes, he disappeared into the darkness of the ductwork. Amara and Vivian were alone. Now what? Vivian asked. Now we wait. Amara slid back down to the floor. And we hope Marcus can pull off a miracle. Silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Outside the door, they could hear occasional footsteps, muffled voices. The guards were still there, still following Dorian's orders. I wasn't lying, you know, Vivian said finally. When I said I loved him. I know. Amara's voice was softer than it had been. I loved him too. Maybe I still do, in some twisted way. That's the worst part, isn't it? Loving someone who's destroyed you. How did you do it? Vivian turned to look at her. How did you smile at him every day, sleep beside him every night, knowing you were planning to destroy him? Practice. Amara touched her throat, feeling the bruises already forming. And motivation. Every time he touched me, I thought about this moment. About him losing everything. About him finally understanding what it feels like to be powerless. You're scary, you know that? Good. Amara smiled without humor. Fear keeps you alive. More silence. Then, what happens to me? After all this? When the FBI comes? That depends. Amara studied the other woman, really looked at her for the first time. How involved were you in his business? The real business. I authenticated art for him. Helped him launder money through sales. Vivian's voice was small. I knew it was illegal. But I convinced myself it wasn't that bad. Just rich people doing rich people things. Weapons, Vivian. He sells weapons. Weapons that kill people. Children, sometimes. Amara let that sink in. So when you authenticated that forged Monet, when you helped him move that money, you were funding death. You were complicit in murder. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. Amara sighed. But if you cooperate with the FBI, if you testify against him, you might avoid prison. Might. Vivian was crying now, quiet tears that smudged what was left of her makeup. I thought he was my ticket to a better life. I thought if I just made myself indispensable enough, if I just gave him everything he wanted, he'd love you, respect you, keep you. Amara shook her head. Men like Dorian don't work that way. They take and take and take, and when there's nothing left to take, they move on. You were never going to be enough, Vivian. Not because you weren't good enough, but because he's incapable of being satisfied. How are you so calm about all this? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. Amara's hands were shaking. But I spent 9 years being the scared wife, the passive victim. I'm done with that. If I'm going to die in this basement, I'm going to die fighting. He's going to kill us, isn't he? Before Amara could answer, they heard it, shouts from outside the room, the sound of running feet, gunshots. Both women froze. What's happening? Vivian whispered. Either Marcus succeeded, or we're about to find out how far Dorian's willing to go. The door burst open. For a moment, Amara couldn't process what she was seeing. Then her brain caught up. FBI tactical gear, assault rifles, organized chaos. Amara Okonkwo? A woman's voice, authoritative and calm. Here. Amara raised her hands slowly. We're unarmed. There's 2 of us. We know. Marcus Reeves called us. Are you injured? Nothing life-threatening. Amara stood carefully, helping Vivian to her feet. Where's Dorian? Attempting to flee the property. We've got units in pursuit. The agent, Sarah Chin, Amara realized, the same woman who'd been at the gala, stepped into the room. You did good work, Mrs. Ashcroft. The evidence you gathered, the testimony from your network, it's enough to put Ashcroft away for the rest of his life. And Volkov? How did he know? Chen's expression darkened. We had a leak. One of our junior agents. He's been arrested. But that's not your concern right now. Let's get you both out of here and to the hospital. As they were led through the mansion, Amara saw the evidence of the raid. Furniture overturned, guards in handcuffs, file cabinets emptied. Years of Dorian's carefully constructed empire was being dismantled in real time. Outside, the night was alive with flashing lights, police cars, FBI vehicles, ambulances. Amara stood on the driveway, breathing in the cold November air, feeling the rain on her face like a baptism. She was free. Then she saw him. Dorian was being led out in handcuffs, flanked by agents. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. When his eyes found hers, she expected rage, hatred, violence. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like respect. You win, he called out as the agents tried to push him toward a waiting car. I underestimated you, Amara. My biggest mistake. No. She walked toward him slowly, aware of the agents tensing, ready to intervene if needed. Your biggest mistake was thinking love was weakness. Was thinking I was weak. Was thinking you could break me without consequence. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the cuts on his face from whatever resistance he'd put up, the defeat in his eyes. I loved you, she said softly. Really loved you. And you destroyed that. You destroyed us. This, she gestured to the chaos around them, this is just the consequence of your choices. Not revenge. Justice. There's no difference, he said. There's every difference. She turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Dorian? I'm keeping the house. My lawyers are filing divorce papers tomorrow, and thanks to the prenup you insisted on, the one that promised me everything if you were convicted of a crime, I'm entitled to all of it. The mansion, the legitimate businesses, the art collection. Everything. She watched his face process this final betrayal, this last humiliation. The woman you slapped for a mistress is going to be living in your house, running your legitimate empire while you rot in prison. She smiled. Sleep well with that thought. As the agents led him away, Amara heard him shouting her name, heard him making threats that would never come to fruition. But his voice faded as the car doors closed, as he was driven away from the empire he'd built on blood and lies. Vivian appeared at her side, wrapped in a blanket provided by the EMTs. What happens now? Now, Amara looked at her, this woman who'd been her enemy, her husband's mistress, and now just another survivor of Dorian Ashcroft's destruction. Now we testify. Now we rebuild. Now we become who we were supposed to be before he diminished us. I don't know who that is anymore. Then you get to figure it out. Amara squeezed her shoulder briefly. We both do. As dawn broke over Seattle, Amara sat in the back of an ambulance, letting the EMTs check her injuries while Kwame gave his statement to the agents in charge. The house behind her house now, stood silent, waiting. She'd survived. More than that, she'd won. But as the adrenaline faded and exhaustion set in, Amara realized something. The victory felt hollow. Not because she regretted what she'd done, but because she'd lost 9 years of her life to a man who'd never deserved them. Because the woman she'd been before Dorian, that bright, ambitious, fearless girl, was gone forever. But maybe, she thought as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, maybe that was okay. Maybe that girl had to die so this woman could be born. Harder, yes. Scarred, absolutely. But unbreakable. And ready to reclaim everything she'd lost. 6 months later, the offices of Okonkwo International occupied the top 3 floors of Seattle's newest high-rise, all glass and steel and ambition. Amara stood at the window of her corner office, looking out over the city spread below her like a kingdom she'd conquered. Behind her, Sophia Ruiz, now her chief operating officer, was reviewing the quarterly reports. We're up another 18%. The rebranding worked even better than we projected. Good. Amara turned from the window, taking in the space she'd created. The art on the walls was legitimate now, purchased through proper channels and appreciated for its beauty rather than its money-laundering potential. The business they ran was clean tech investments, sustainable development, economic consulting for emerging markets. Everything Dorian had built on crime, she'd rebuilt on legitimacy. The Forbes interview is scheduled for next week, Sophia continued. They want to feature you in their 30 under 40-foot list. Amara smiled. She'd turned 32 last month, but close enough. What's the angle? From trophy wife to tech mogul in 6 months. Classic redemption story. Sophia looked up from her tablet. Though I convinced them to focus less on Dorian and more on your actual accomplishments. Your work in Nigeria, especially the microfinance initiative, is genuinely innovative. The Nigerian initiative was Amara's pride and joy, a program that provided small business loans to women entrepreneurs in Lagos, funded entirely by profits from the tech investments. It was everything she'd dreamed of doing when she was 23, before Dorian convinced her those dreams didn't matter. Now, finally, she was living them. How's Marcus doing? Amara asked, changing the subject. Good. He says the physical therapy is helping with his shoulder. And he's enjoying the security consulting work. Sophia smiled. Turns out, having an ex-bodyguard who helped take down a crime boss is excellent for business. And Vivian? Sophia's expression shifted slightly. Still in witness protection, last I heard. Testified at Dorian's trial, got a reduced sentence. She'll be out in 18 months if she keeps her nose clean. The trial had been the media event of the year. Dorian Ashcroft, once Seattle's most eligible bachelor and respected businessman, revealed as an international weapons dealer. The evidence had been overwhelming: recordings, documents, testimony from a dozen witnesses, including his own wife. He'd gotten 40 years without possibility of parole. Amara had attended every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery where he could see her. Not because she enjoyed watching him fall, though she wouldn't lie and say there wasn't satisfaction in it, but because she needed to see it through. Needed to witness the consequence of every choice that had led them here. On the final day, after the verdict was read, Dorian had looked at her one last time. and she looked back, unwavering. Your 11 o'clock is here, Sophia said, checking her watch. Kwame Mensa. Amara's pulse quickened slightly, though she kept her expression neutral. Send him in. Kwame entered looking sharp in a suit that actually fit him, a far cry from the rumpled FBI agent she'd conspired with in that safe house 6 months ago. He'd been promoted after the Ashcroft case, youngest SC in the Seattle field office, and he wore the responsibility well. Amara. He smiled, and it reached his eyes. Your office is impressive. Thank you. Coffee? Please. She poured them both cups from the French press on her desk, real coffee, the good kind from Ethiopia that her mother had sent her. They settled into the chairs by the window, a comfortable silence stretching between them. How's the hand? He asked, nodding at the faint scar on her palm from prying open the ventilation grate. Healed. Mostly. She flexed her fingers. Though I'll always have the reminder. Reminders aren't always bad. No, she agreed. They keep us honest about where we've been. Kwame set down his cup and looked at her seriously. I came to tell you something. About Dorian. Amara's stomach tightened. What about him? He's been trying to reach you. Letters, mostly. The prison keeps flagging them, but he's persistent. I don't want to read them. I know. That's why I'm telling you, so you can file a formal no-contact order if you want. Make it official. She considered this. Part of her was curious about what Dorian would say to her now, what words he thought could possibly matter after everything. But a larger part, the wiser part, knew that reading those letters would be giving him power he no longer deserved. File the order, she said. I'm done being haunted by him. Kwame nodded, then pulled out an envelope from his jacket. There is one letter you should read, though. It's not from him. Amara took the envelope, recognizing the handwriting immediately. Her mother's. She opened it carefully, aware of Kwame watching her. Inside, written in her mother's precise script, was a single page. My darling Amara. I heard about everything. Your father wanted me to write to scold you for the scandal, but I told him to be silent. What do men know of survival? You did what you had to do. What your grandmother would have done. What I would have done. You survived, and more than that, you conquered. Come home when you're ready. We miss you. But more importantly, we're proud of you. Your mother. Amara read it twice, then carefully folded it and put it back in the envelope. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Good news? Kwame asked gently. The best. She wiped her eyes unselfconsciously. My mother's proud of me. Do you know how long I've waited to hear that? I can imagine. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city wake up below them. Then Kwame spoke again. I know this is probably too soon, and feel free to tell me to mind my business, but are you seeing anyone? Amara looked at him, really looked at him. Kwame, who'd answered her desperate phone call at 3 in the morning. Who'd believed her when she said she could take down Dorian. Who'd risked his career to help her and expected nothing in return. Kwame, who'd been there before Dorian and who was here after. I'm not ready, she said honestly. Not yet. The divorce was only finalized last month, and I'm still figuring out who I am outside of being Dorian's wife. I understand. But, she continued, surprising herself, ask me again in 6 months. When I've had time to be just me. When I'm whole on my own, not because someone put me back together. His smile was warm, patient. 6 months. I can wait 6 months. After he left, Amara sat alone in her office, looking at the photograph she kept on her desk. It was old, from her first week at university, her and her mother and grandmother, 3 generations of strong women, all smiling at the camera. Her grandmother had died 2 years before she met Dorian. Amara wondered sometimes what she would have thought of him, of the choices Amara had made. But she knew the answer. Her grandmother would have recognized Dorian for what he was immediately, would have warned her, might even have locked her in a room to prevent the marriage. But she also would have been proud of how Amara fought back, how she survived, how she won. "I did it, Grandma," Amara whispered to the photograph. "I got out. And I'm going to be okay." Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it, but something made her open it. "I saw the Forbes article. You look happy. You deserve that. I'm sorry for everything. Vivian." From wherever witness protection had stashed her, reaching out across the void. Amara stared at the message for a long time. She could ignore it, block the number, pretend it never existed. Instead, she typed back, "I am happy. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. I hope you find that too, Vivian. I hope we both do." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Because that was the thing about revenge she'd learned. It could destroy your enemies, could bring them to justice, could even give you back your life. But it couldn't make you whole. That was work you had to do yourself. That evening, Amara left the office early, something she was teaching herself to do, to have a life outside of work, outside of proving herself. She went to a small Ethiopian restaurant in the International District, the kind of place Dorian would never have been caught dead in. She ordered Doro what and injera, the comfort food of her childhood, and ate slowly, savoring every bite. Around her, families laughed and talked in Amharic and Tigrinya, and for the first time since leaving Nigeria, she felt like she belonged somewhere. After dinner, she walked through the city as the sun set, no bodyguards, no schedule, no one to answer to. Just her and the evening and the possibility of everything that came next. Her phone rang. Her mother. "Amara? Did you get my letter?" "I did, Mama. Thank you. Are you well?" "Really well." Amara thought about the question. 6 months ago, she would have said she was surviving. 3 months ago, recovering. But now? "I'm more than well, Mama. I'm free." "Good. Then come home for Christmas." "It's been too long." "I will. I promise." After they hung up, Amara found herself in front of the Seattle Art Museum. On impulse, she bought a ticket and went inside, wandering through galleries she'd visited 100 times as Dorian's wife, but never really seen. In the contemporary wing, she stopped in front of a painting, a black woman standing in a doorway, half in shadow, half in light. The placard said it was titled Threshold. Amara stared at it for a long time. That's what she was, she realized. Standing on a threshold between who she'd been and who she was becoming. The darkness behind her, all those years with Dorian, all that pain and diminishment, and the light ahead, uncertain but full of possibility. She could step forward into it now. Leave the darkness behind. Not forget it, never forget it, because those scars were part of her story, but not let it define her anymore. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of the painting. Then she opened her notes app and started writing. Note to self, you survived the worst thing you could imagine. You stood up to the man who tried to break you and you won. You built something beautiful from the ashes of your old life. You are not a victim. You are not a survivor. You are a woman who refused to stay broken, and that is the most powerful thing you can be. Remember this on the hard days. Remember who you are. Remember what you're capable of. You are Amara Okonkwo, and you are unstoppable. She saved the note and walked out of the museum into the Seattle night, where the city lights sparkled like promises and the future stretched out before her like a story waiting to be written. Behind her, in a federal prison 3 hours away, Dorian Ashcroft lay on a narrow bunk in a cell barely bigger than the closet in the mansion he'd lost. He stared at the ceiling and thought about the wife who'd destroyed him and wondered if he'd ever really known her at all. But Amara wasn't thinking about him. She was thinking about Lagos in December, about her mother's cooking and her father's lectures, and the cousins she hadn't seen in years. She was thinking about the microfinance program, and the women she was helping and the difference she was making. She was thinking about Kwame's smile and the possibility of 6 months from now and maybe, just maybe, opening her heart again to someone who deserved it. She was thinking about the board meeting next week, where she'd propose expanding the company into 3 new markets. About the scholarship fund she was creating for young women in STEM. About the book she might write someday, about survival and strength and the power of refusing to stay down. She was thinking about everything except the man who'd slapped her for a mistress and learned too late that some women don't break. They break you instead. And then they build empires from the ruins. If you made it this far, I need you to do something for me. This story, Amara's story, it matters. Not just because it's dramatic or satisfying, but because somewhere, someone needed to hear that you can lose everything and still win. That being underestimated is its own kind of power. That the woman who seems broken might just be gathering her strength. But here's the thing, if you don't share this, if you don't subscribe, if you scroll away and forget, then these stories disappear. Then Amara's voice disappears. And the next person who needs to hear this message won't find it. So I'm asking, no, I'm telling you, hit that subscribe button. Share this video. Leave a comment about which moment hit you hardest. Not for me. For everyone who comes after you, searching for proof that survival is possible. That revenge is real. That justice exists. Don't let this story end here. Let it ripple. Let it spread. Let it remind everyone who sees it that the woman you underestimate might just be the one who destroys you. Subscribe now. Because stories like Amara's deserve to be heard. And you deserve to be part of making sure they are.